From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Thank you for joining us today. Here our discussion of Pesach and mood swings. We all deal with, to one extent or another, with mood swings. Sometimes we feel good, sometimes we feel bad. Some people deal in a very extreme way, a clinical perspective, mood swings. But all of us, to some degree, deal with the question of a good day and a bad day and integrating these different feelings, sometimes all in one day. We as Jews are experts in how to deal with both sorrow and joy. After all, who has experienced more upswings and downturns of history than the Jewish people? From the glory of the Exodus and the splitting of the sea, receiving the Ten Commandments, the conquest of the land of Israel several times. Versus, on the other hand, degradation, poverty, exile from the first temple and the second temple, and the Inquisition, and the exile from Spain, the Crusaders, the Holocaust. How many people have dealt with all of this and still remain a people full of joy, full of jokes, full of humor, and full of hope for the future? How do we do it? I believe that the Haggadah, the story of Pesach, the Seder, the genius of Pesach and its various rituals can tell us so much about how to deal with our day-to-day questions of dealing with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Firstly, the Haggadah says that in order to appreciate where we are, and in order to sing songs of praise at the end of the Haggadah, to be Mesayim Bishvach, to end with the praise of God, you know what you need to do? You need to matchil begnut. You need to start with a really negative, nasty part of the story. Go into the worst part of the story you can imagine. Well, what's really bad? Being a slave, that's pretty embarrassing. Geri Yezaracha, being a stranger in other people's lands, a state which Jews to this day suffer from, being strangers in someone else's country, or being told that you don't belong somehow. But even worse than that, to say mitchila uvdei avodah zarah hayu avotenu, to admit as a people so proud of our monotheism that we were once pagans. Our ancestors, Abraham in his childhood, his father Terach, were idol worshippers. This is an amazing admission. Why is it so important to begin the story with something so negative? Because if you can remember where you came from, if you remember that it was even worse once upon a time, it makes things much better. On the contrary, the fact that we have so much of a history of degradation and suffering and death, it makes it much easier to look at today and say, maybe today is not so bad, in contrast, in perspective with what was. So our first principle in dealing with a bad day, the mood swings, is to gain perspective. Look at how bad things used to be in the olden days. We were slaves. We used to worship idols. We were strangers. We were persecuted. We were almost destroyed. And that gives us a great joy in where we are today. Now we're free. Now we do worship God. We're no longer strangers. For many Jews can declare today they're no longer living in someone else's land. Today we are not persecuted or being chased down to the last Jew. Then there's a second perspective. The second perspective is no matter how bad today is, it's only a story within the continuum of our story, and we're heading to a much better place. We begin the Seder by saying, Hashata Hacha. Now we're over here. L'shana haba b'nei chorim. Next year we'll be really free. Hashata Hacha l'shana ba'ard Yisrael. This year we're here. Next year we'll be in Israel. Next year we'll be in the land of Israel. We'll be in Jerusalem. The Ovadia Yosef in his Haggadah Chazon Ovadia, he says, you have the matzah representing freedom, the maror. Then after you eat the matzah, you eat the maror, as if to say, yeah, it's true. We had a redemption from Egypt one day, once upon a time, but after that, and to this day, we have plenty of bitterness, plenty of children being shot at from buses by rockets, plenty of people dying in their own land of Israel today because they are Jews, bombings in Jerusalem. There's plenty of more after all those great redemptions, after the founding of the State of Israel, after the 6 Day War, after the victories of the Jewish people throughout the ages. Plenty of suffering still remains, plenty of more. But at the end of the Seder, says Rav Ovadia, we go and we eat the afikomen, we eat that last piece of matzah representing the final redemption, the redemption after which there will be no other maror. After that redemption, after the end of days, there will be no maror. How do we find optimism in a world full of troubles? We look forward, we are hopeful, we know that one day there will be something that will be so grand, we'll have no bitterness with it. Another way of dealing with sadness is to bifurcate our experiences. To remember that b'shas chedves achedves, at the time of joy, joy. So at the Seder, we should have only joy. But as one of my teachers, Rabbi J.J. Schachter, pointed out, what we do is we say to ourselves, look, we're having a very joyful experience. It's a Seder, it's Pesach, it's a holiday. But there is some sadness. There's sadness because there's so many troubles that continue to face us, that have faced us over the years, individually, nationally. So what we do is we say, look, we're not in denial of those problems, but we'll hint to it. For instance, we eat the egg. An egg can represent the holiday offering, can represent a lot of things. But there is a hint to perhaps the notion of mourning. The mourner's meal includes an egg, something round, representing the cycle of life. We allude to it. The kittel, it's a white garment some people wear during the Seder. It can represent joy and festive garment, something white and bright, or like the high priest in the temple in Jerusalem. But it can also represent sadness and death. There's an allusion to death. One way of dealing with sadness is to say, look, today is not for sadness, today is for joy. But not to totally forget the sadness. We always leave one part of the building. There's an ancient tradition, not so much practiced today, but an idea that maybe when you build a beautiful edifice, leave one piece to remember the destruction. To have something at the Seder, that egg, that kittel, that just reminds us in some way. An interesting interpretation by a certain Rabbi Didier Weil, again, thanks to Rabbi Schachter sharing it with us, says that even the Chad Gadya, we say, oh, it's a nice song about the 2 kids that were bought by my father. Chad Gadya, and we say it twice. But he says, no, there's actually a hint there. At Chad Gadya, there was one kid, that was the first temple was destroyed. Chad Gadya, there was another temple, another kid that was destroyed. The second temple was destroyed. We just hint to the sadness, but we don't delve into it. Finally, there's a debate about the following. If we're going to be rejoicing, so should we just focus on the rejoicing, or should we say to God, look, we're happy for today, we're not slaves anymore, but we have, after all, our own state of Israel, the land of Israel. Many Jews live in Israel. But there are, after all, many challenges. So should we say, look, today we're just going to focus on this. Today we are happy. Or should we say, you know what, we're happy, it's genuine, it's whole, it's complete, we're truly happy, but we do recognize that we have other hopes as well, and we pray for things in the future. One rabbi in the Mishnah said, let's just say we're happy that tonight we ate matzah and maror. We're happy. So we didn't eat the Paschal lamb, which was the main course. All right, but we're happy we had the mitzvah of matzah and the mitzvah of maror. And we told the story and we had the 4 cups. We're happy. Tonight we're able to fulfill and do so many mitzvahs. Rabbi Kiva, another rabbi in the Mishnah, comes and says, that's good, but you need to say something else. And that is, we need to say that just as you've helped us come to tonight and all the good things that means, so too we hope you'll bring us to another, even better time in Jerusalem with all the fulfillments of all the things that Pesach was supposed to have in it. Let's hope that we can reach that day. 2 approaches. One says, focus only on the good during the good times. And the other says, even as you focus on so many wonderful things that the Seder night represents and is in its essence, at the same time, you can always remember and pray for even better times. We as Jews are experts in how to deal with mood swings in different moods. The Haggadah gives us many tools to deal with not only the good days and how to rejoice with them, but even the bad days as well. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfar Beth El Congregation. And again, thanks to Rabbi J.J. Schachter of the Center for the Jewish Future for one number of wonderful sources for tonight's discussion. Furthermore, we want to thank Jason Lefkowitz for making today's presentation possible. And we learn as we do throughout the year, in memory of my father of blessed memory, Baruch Reb Chaim Shmuel, Mr. Bernard Finkelstein, who loved to talk all about the different interpretations of the Haggadah. Thank you for joining us.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.